Greetings and salutations, YouTube. This is your friendly neighborhood armchair philosopher, Fragments of Memory. I pose the question, why are so many so-called white Americans so up in arms about people not standing when the Star-Spangled Banner is sung or played? Especially when the players taking a knee are doing this as a form of protest, which is a freedom protected by the United States Constitution. Some would call it disrespectful to those who have served in this nation's armed forces, military, what have you, or are currently serving. They call this action divisive, a threat to this country's unity. The argument seems sound. However, let us remember that many of the people who are taking umbrage with it are people who haven't experienced what black people have experienced on a collective level. The reason that there are those taking a knee is to show solidarity with those who protest against the police force who engage in brutality against persons of color, where an unarmed black man shouldn't be shot because the police officer thought his life was going to be threatened. And we're seeing too many cases of this, and the police officer gets no jail time and no conviction. So it makes us wonder, is the system really working for us as black people? Or are we just supposed to be silent and suffer in that silence? Meanwhile, and let me put some other perspective to this. Meanwhile, the very people who criticize those taking a knee attempt to make those folks seem as though the protesters are somehow non-American. And to that I say, black people are some of the most patriotic, United States loyal folks within this country. We have helped so-called white America fight the wars and conflicts that this country has gotten into. Black people have fought, bled, and died for the United States of America. From the Revolutionary War on up, we have served, shot, been shot at, bled, died, suffered, all that, alongside those white soldiers. And in return, we still have been relegated to what we've been relegated to. There was even an incident during World War I or World War II era. Black soldiers would come home in full uniform, and down south, Klan members would lynch them while they were wearing their United States uniform. Ain't that about a blip? So, again, let me reiterate that. These men who fought, bled, and died for America, their blood, sweat, and tears in America, died for America, died overseas fighting these wars, those same men were lynched by these other Americans while they were in their uniform. Now, the YouTuber Sergeant Willie P discussed this, and I've actually researched that, and that's gospel truth right there. So when I see things like this, I wonder, why are these so-called white Americans taking all this umbrage with this black man saying, hey, look, I'm going to use my celebrity, I'm going to use my connection to let people know this isn't right? How can you claim to be the land of the free and the home of the brave, and yet the very law enforcement that's supposed to be protecting its so-called citizens is killing its so-called citizens? These aren't criminals. This isn't some shootout. This was a police officer going way too far, and we became the casualties. Even though we're citizens, even though we're taxpayers, even though I remember growing up saying the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag in elementary school. Now, I was a child when Ronald Reagan was president. I remember saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I remember standing for the games and putting my hand over my heart. I remember having to take the federal and state constitution tests so I can pass high school. I remember this stuff. And then now to be taught that, you know what? If the police officer feels you're a threat, you can basically, your life is forfeit. It's kind of like being one of the X-Men while the Sentinels are running around. Then, so it perturbs me when I see certain Americans take umbrage with the other Americans who want to protest. I mean, we all want to morally grandstand like things like slavery, Jim Crow, and other stuff did not happen historically in this country. We tend to want to gloss over it because we don't want to face up to it. We also don't want to face up to the fact that, hey, many of our founding fathers of this great nation were slave owners. Thomas Jefferson, the man who penned the words of the Declaration of Independence, he said all men are created equal. But at the same time, what did he do? He was a slave owner. He profited off of the institution of chattel slavery while saying all men are created equal. Goes to show the duality of man, right? Now the comedian Chris Rock. You know Chris Rock, everybody knows Chris Rock. He did in one of his stand-up bits, he said, he used the analogy of the United States being like a really rich uncle that put you through college, but that uncle molested you. And that's how black people's relationship to the United States is. Look, I'm not from a foreign country. I was born here in the United States. I'm a product of the United States. Grew up here in St. Louis County. So, born in St. Louis City, Missouri, and grew up in St. Louis County. So I'm a Midwest guy, the child of two rivers, the Missouri and the Mississippi. I'm the heartland of America. And yet, I can be murdered by the very people that are in place to supposedly protect me. Now, yes, we can argue about the history of overseers, and we could talk about that, and we can go into full detail about that, but I'm not going to have that conversation here. James Baldwin, in his book Notes from a Native Son, said this. He said, "I love America more than any other country in this world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually." So yes, I'm with him on that. I think there are many freedoms and privileges I have enjoyed living on the United States soil. I'll give you that. Even in being a black man in America, even in being part of a marginalized group, I get a little bit of benefit from just being on American soil. But I'm not blind to the fact that this nation has done its dirt. Just like people are creatures of virtue and vice, so are nations. And it's always murky, you know? So for those of you who want to grandstand and showboat and morally sort of try to put yourself on this high platform of moral unassailability, feel free. But just know this. We see what you do. We see what you claim. We see what you don't do. Also, too, I have every right to speak on it. I have every right to speak on America's glories, and I have every right to speak on the atrocities she has committed. Well, that's just my 2 cents. So, be easy like Sunday morning, and thank you.